Hi, my name is Marios and I'm an honorary assistant psychologist at the private therapy clinic in Harley Street, London. Today we're going to talk about low self-esteem, what it is, how to tell if you might have low self-esteem, and what you can do about it. So what is low self-esteem? Esteem means how much you value something. So if you hold somebody in high esteem, it means you think they are valuable, that their contribution is great, and you just look up to them. If you have low self-esteem, then that means that you view yourself as below average or low in terms of value, intrinsic value as a person, in terms of your contribution to the world. And so you can see that that might begin to feed into narratives around whether what you do is worthwhile, really hyper-focusing or magnifying mistakes that you make. So you may hyper-focus on things that are going poorly in your own life or behaviors that you've done that maybe didn't result in the best outcomes and completely blaming yourself for that. You may also undermine what positive things you do. You might say it's just because of luck, or anyone could have done that, or it was good but it was not amazing, etc. And so you never really get to enjoy the positive, and you also ruminate excessively on the negative. So those might be signs that you may be suffering from low self-esteem. Self-esteem may precede or follow from other mental health disorders such as anxiety and depression. So that means that you may begin with low self-esteem and develop anxiety and depression as a result, or you may develop depression or anxiety or both and then have a low self-esteem as a result. So how could either of those happen? So one, when it comes to low self-esteem, you will begin to interpret everything negatively already, which is overlapping with the general traits associated with depression. Anxiety also relates mostly to a fear of what might happen and a doubt as to whether or not you'll be able to deal with things that happen in your life. And so that and low self-esteem are very jointly tied together. And so you might be able to see how if you begin with a low self-image, this begins to snowball into either depression, where it comes to hopelessness, negative view of the world and yourself, and everything being very gloomy and without hope. Whereas anxiety is much more about, I'm not sure if I can deal with this, I can't deal with this, there are too many unknowns, I'm afraid, I'm at risk. So if you begin with either of those disorders, you may then begin to feel like, well, I can't cope with life, and therefore you develop a low self-image as a result. Or if you don't have either of those, you may begin to create such a heavy pattern in your thinking due to your low self-esteem that you actually develop either of those disorders. So what other things might be happening when you have low self-esteem in order for you to get clued up as to whether or not you're in that state? So one thing is, when it comes to social interactions, you may put yourself below others, and what that will tend to mean is you don't assert yourself, you will not express your opinion as much as you let others do for their own. You may offer a lot to others and not ask for a lot in return, or be afraid to ask for things in return. You may be very, very afraid of rejection, because rejection shows that potentially someone else views you negatively or just is not willing to do something for you in that time. And you will then begin to think of that as, oh, it's because of who I am, it's because I'm not worthy, etc. Even though there may be several other non-negative reasons that that might happen. Other things you might do is find it difficult to engage in situations that you are not used to. So new environments, new groups of people, that might fill you with fear, because you will ultimately think that they will see you for what you view yourself to be, which is somebody of low value. And so you begin to withdraw from the rest of the world. This is unfortunate, because actually connection is something that you very much need when you have low self-esteem, because forging genuine relationships, friendships and connections are going to show you that actually people do care about you, and even people that you haven't met yet could care about you and could love you, and that will then begin to counteract some of the negative thoughts that have become ingrained as a result of having low self-esteem. Another thing you might do in a social context is to compare yourself to others excessively. So for the most part, this will mean that it always ends up putting you in a negative light, meaning everyone else is better than me, everyone else is doing so much better than me, so much more competent, so much more successful, etc. And this will kind of double down onto your negative self-image. So any comparison is the thief of joy generally, but with low self-esteem particularly, it becomes a real problem. Another thing this might do is make you unable to reinforce boundaries. So boundaries are very healthy. So people asking too much of you, people stepping over what they should in terms of the level of responsibility they might ask you to take for something, or perhaps they are expecting more than you would for someone that you know that little. They may just really be pushing it. And if you have low self-esteem, you're actually more likely to just accept that and just go ahead with it because you don't want to disappoint anyone. So people pleasing is quite common when it comes to having low self-esteem, and that's because you really need any potential improvement in your self-image, and you'll seek the validation of others in order to obtain that. And so two things could actually happen there. If you have the opportunity to offer services such as at work or for friends or people you've just met, you may begin to over subscribe to what they want, and so try to give them more than you should really, and really just creating a martyr of yourself. And this is because you want that hit of, I'm doing good things for them, they'll like me because I'm doing things for them, rather than they should like me for who I am and that I'm being my authentic self with them. At work, you might seek to take on more than you would be expected to for your role, much more. I mean, it's always good to push yourself and be ambitious in that sense. But if you have low self-esteem, it might actually be a symptom of, I'm not good enough as I am. I'm just going to keep pushing for more and more responsibility and basically do other people's jobs just to make them feel like I am useful. And you may even begin to neglect your own workload as a result, because if it's your workload and your self-image is low, you will then begin to think, well, my work is not even as important as other people's, so you might as well help them do theirs, and that can of course be detrimental to your own performance at work. And so what might you be able to do if you notice that you have some of these patterns? One of the things you should begin to practice is mindfulness as to your own thoughts. So that means being aware of exactly what you are thinking. So if something happens, if I do something that I consider a failure and I say to myself, I'm such a failure, I'm pathetic, that was ridiculous that I couldn't do that. First of all, just begin to be aware that that thought is what happens automatically, because a lot of the time we're so entrenched in our habits when it comes to our thinking that we fail to notice what is happening at that time. So once you become more aware of what the trigger is, for example, failing at something, and then what the thoughts are, you can begin to deconstruct that and have some more healthy alternatives be contrasted with those automatic thoughts. So following on from that example, I failed at something, I'm pathetic, I'm useless, I have no abilities, I'm not worthwhile. What you can then do after you're able to detect those moments where those negative thoughts are coming up, you can then start to say, right, well, let's try and take a more objective position. One easy way of doing that is to think, what if my best friend or someone I care about dearly had done the same, had achieved the same result, given the same circumstances as you? You are much less likely to be as negative about them than you are about yourself when you have low self-esteem. So that same scenario, if my best friend had failed at something, what would I say about her? I might say she just wasn't given enough support, or she may have needed more time, or she didn't actually fail, it was a good first attempt, she might just have to try again. That's a healthy rebuttal to the negative self-talk that automatically happens when you have low self-esteem. So you can see how beginning with the trigger, then noticing the automatic negative thoughts are the beginning of looking at this situation a bit more objectively, and then following up with a healthy rebuttal or alternative. What that will then do is begin to, over time, replace the negative thoughts, the negative automatic thoughts, with some more balanced thinking. So try and keep those two things very close together, meaning don't wait until long after the event to start thinking about the positive results, but actually as the negative thoughts are happening, say, okay, for this negative thought, here is a more reasonable, sensible assessment of what happened. In this example, it was what you would say about your best friend going through the same thing. And what that will do is begin to create a more positive feedback loop when it comes to failure. And you'll begin to actually be more encouraged, more motivated to do things. And you'll begin to see like, oh, actually, I'm okay despite failure. Failure is a part of the process of succeeding. And you can do the same the other way around. So for example, if it is a success and you cannot take credit for it, you don't feel like it's about you, do it for a friend. What if your friend has succeeded? You'd say, he's great, well done for him. It's so amazing that he is so dedicated and that he achieved that outcome. That's the kind of thoughts that you should then try and replace with the negative thinking that you have around your own successes. One other thing you could do in terms of behaviors in order to improve your self-esteem is to focus on agency. And agency just means how much you feel in control of your own life. So that might not feel something that resonates with you now because you may not feel that you have a lot of control in your own life, or that your efforts to control things and make decisions is futile because you always make the wrong decisions. But you can start much smaller. So by saying, I'm going to do something good for myself today, which is, cleaning up my office because I work better in a clean space. And then showing that actually you can follow through with that. And if, sometimes you fail, you can try again, but also you can set yourself smaller tasks. So for example, I want a really clean desk before I start working, and showing that I will show myself the respect of giving myself a clean desk or a clean office, and then building up from there and say, actually, when I decide to do something, I can follow through with it. Failure is okay, and we covered that already. But showing that when you do show up for yourself, you're doing that because you are worthy, you are better than you think. And you're showing that with your actions by saying someone who is worthwhile would deserve to be in a clean environment, for example, to eat healthy food, to have positive people around them who are supportive in any kind of situation in their life, whether good or bad. And that will then begin to feed into a new image about yourself. So when you begin to behave to yourself as you would someone you care about, that is really the right direction to be moving in when it comes to improving your self-esteem.